before history was written. In 1943, Nazi Germany still controlled vast portions of Europe. Millions of soldiers marched under the banner of the Third Reich, factories operated day and night, and Hitler's speeches promised that ultimate victory was still within reach. To the outside world, Germany appeared strong, disciplined, and unstoppable. Yet behind the carefully constructed illusion, the reality was far darker. For the first time since the war began, German leaders were quietly confronting a truth they refused to say aloud: the war could no longer be won. The events of 1943 did not end World War II, but they irreversibly determined its outcome. The collapse at Stalingrad marked a turning point unlike any other. In February 1943, more than 300,000 German soldiers were killed, wounded, or captured after months of brutal urban combat and freezing temperatures. Never before had an entire German army surrendered. The psychological impact was devastating. The myth of invincibility that had carried the Reich through Poland, France, and the early stages of the Eastern Front was shattered. German officers who once trusted Hitler's instincts began to question his leadership, while Hitler himself withdrew deeper into isolation, rejecting reports that contradicted his expectations and surrounding himself with those who told him only what he wanted to hear. As the shock of Stalingrad spread, the nature of the war itself began to change. What had once been a conflict defined by speed, maneuver, and tactical brilliance was transformed into a war of production and endurance. The United States had entered the war with unmatched industrial capacity, turning factories into weapons on a scale never seen before. Tanks, aircraft, ships, and ammunition were produced faster than they could be destroyed. Germany, already strained by years of total war, simply could not compete. While Allied industry expanded, German cities were slowly reduced to rubble under relentless bombing campaigns that targeted factories, rail networks, and fuel supplies essential to sustaining the war effort. Nowhere was this imbalance more visible than in the skies. The Luftwaffe, once the most feared air force in the world, began to collapse. Experienced pilots were lost in increasing numbers, while new recruits were rushed into combat with inadequate training and inferior equipment. Allied air forces, learning from earlier mistakes, improved their tactics and coordination, gradually gaining air superiority. By 1943, Germany could no longer protect its own airspace. Bombers penetrated deep into the Reich, destroying industrial centers and oil refineries, while the Luftwaffe struggled merely to survive rather than dominate. As military reality deteriorated, Hitler responded not with adaptation but with control. He centralized decision-making, overruled his generals, and forbade strategic withdrawals even when defeat was inevitable. Entire armies were ordered to hold their positions to the last man, resulting in encirclements, massive casualties, and the loss of irreplaceable equipment. What had once been a war directed by experienced commanders became a campaign driven by ideology, pride, and denial. Each failure was met not with reflection, but with harsher demands and increasingly unrealistic expectations. By the end of 1943, the outcome of the war was no longer in doubt. The defeat at Kursk confirmed that Germany had lost its offensive capability, the Red Army was advancing relentlessly from the east, and the Allies were preparing to open a second front in the west. Germany was no longer fighting for victory, but for time. Every additional month of war meant more destruction, more civilian suffering, and more lives lost on all sides. World War II would continue for 2 more years, but after 1943, it was no longer a battle for dominance. It was a countdown to collapse, driven by decisions made long after the war had already been lost.